Amanda, it's so lovely to have you here. This is a topic that I actually really like to talk about. A lot of people probably don't like to talk about it. We've had a couple of other guest experts on the podcast to talk about alcohol and maybe being sober curious. But the aspects that I have seen you teach are a little bit different. Like we've talked quite a bit about just what the physical symptoms are of alcohol and the detrimental things that it does to our bodies. And I think a lot of people are pretty well versed with that, especially women who listen to this podcast. But we're going to talk about some other things that are really interesting. So please tell the listeners a little bit about your background story and how you got so interested in this.
Yes. Well, thank you for having me today. I am really excited because we are going to take a little bit more of a optimistically focused approach to going alcohol free and maybe being sober, or taking a break from alcohol, whatever fits your lifestyle the most. And I think that that is a really novel approach to this topic because we live in a society where we've been taught that the only reason you should ever need to quit drinking is if you're addicted, and that's also very shameful and secretive, and you shouldn't really, you should try and stay away from that as much as possible. And I think that the approach of addiction is so important, and it's definitely an important topic to talk about, but that is not my story nor the way that I teach, because I didn't have an addiction to alcohol or a rock bottom. And I came to the decision to stop drinking after a lot of soul searching, personal development, wellness work that I was doing in my late 20s. And I had really come into this place where I wanted to live a better life. And I started to do all of the things that equate to being a well, healthy, mindful person. I was exercising. I was being really mindful about what I was eating. I was meditating. I was doing affirmations. I was working directly with some of the really big spiritual and self-help teachers of our time. And then on the weekends, I was doing what everyone else did. And we were just talking before we started recording. I grew up in the Midwest and lived my young adulthood there. And that was 5 o'clock p.m. on Friday. I was going out to happy hour and spending the weekend out on the social scene, either just rubbing elbows with people or trying to work off the stress from a difficult week at work. Whatever my, process was for the week, there was always an excuse to drink. And a couple of, a little while into my personal wellness journey, I started to wonder why I wasn't really seeing the benefits that I'd been reading about in the self-help books that I was reading. And I started to feel a little ashamed, like maybe there was something wrong with me. Maybe I was, not a chosen one to be healthy and well and happy. And not that I was depressed, but I just didn't feel like, oh, wow, I'm living this vibrant life that everyone's talked about. And I started to wonder, maybe it's not so much about adding all of these new positive habits into my life. What if I've missed the mark and it's actually about removing a not so good habit? And at that point, really the only habit that was there was alcohol. And as a young, 20, 30 something, I really didn't want that to be the answer because I thought that I needed alcohol and deserved it as part of my livelihood. But the more that I investigated, the more clear it became that alcohol was doing me no favors. And no matter how much I tried to cut back, it didn't really help the situation. So finally, in January 2017, I decided that I would just take a break. And I took a 30-day break to start, and 30 days turned into 60 days, 60 days turned into 90. And it just kept adding up. And today I'm almost 8 years alcohol free, and my life has never been better. All of the things that I wanted for when I started on my wellness journey have come to fruition. And now I teach this to help other women who might kind of have some big dreams and goals on their hearts and have realized that alcohol is getting in the way.
What a great story. And you're so young to start to think about this and discover it. Like I'm almost 2 years out of not drinking. And like I'll be 49 in a couple weeks. I'm like, I wish I were in my 20s when I had these thoughts. But my story is similar to, like, I never felt addicted to alcohol.
Mhm.
Um, you know, in Wisconsin, even high school, college culture, drinking is very, very strong part of the, especially college culture here. And that's really when I probably did the most damage to my body,
Mhm.
like a lot of people. But I just got to the point where I'm like, this isn't serving me. I don't really like it. I don't sleep well when I have it. Like the only reason I am really drinking is because of social reasons. and we can get into this. Like, I almost felt like, being a nutritionist and a metabolic health specialist and doing so many healthy things for my body so that I can feel good and live well. And that's just how I like to live. I almost was just drinking just to prove to people there is a little part of me that isn't health, like it's not
Yeah, like you're not like a goody goody or
or
something like that almost.
exactly. Even though like I've been almost it's been well, so I went sober or I stopped drinking, same as you, like January of 2023.
Mhm,
And that year I had 5 drinks and they were all in the same week because my son, who was a senior at the time, we went on a mom-son senior trip to Florida. And it and that and not like the other moms were pressuring me, but you just felt like, they know me as this big health professional. Like, I'm just going to sit on the beach and have a couple drinks. And so that was really the last time that I've drank. But even before that, like 5 years before that, I mean, I hardly drank at all. I'd always be the one like, I'll drive, like
mhm,
an excuse. Because I feel like for me, I've never tolerated alcohol well. Like, I have a drink or two and I am buzzed and I am saying stupid stuff. Like, the stupidest things I've ever done or said are when I've had alcohol
mhm.
in my system. But I was never like a rock bottom kind of person either. But I just like I can just relate to your story. And um it's so hard to even know where to start because there's so many things. But let's talk about like the friendship part of it, because I know for me that is probably the hardest. Like I was saying, like I was just drinking kind of just to feel like I was still fitting in. And I love my friend. Like I have a really great group of girlfriends that I hang out with, but I'm the only one who like never drink. And
Yeah.
not like they're like these big drunks or anything, but it's almost to the point like I pick a daytime activities to like, let's meet for a walk, let's meet for a lunch. And I've like shied away from the whole like, let's go out for, like let's go out and watch a football game or whatever at night because
Mhm.
I don't want to be in that whole scene anymore. So how can we navigate the changes with friends? Because I feel like that no matter how old you are, if you're in your 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, like that is a huge part of why people aren't giving up alcohol, more readily because of the whole thing with the friends and
Yeah.
feeling like you're going to be an outcast.
Oh, absolutely. Anytime I do a client intake, I have this spreadsheet for years and years and years of hundreds of women who I've worked with. And the number one reason is almost always, I'm afraid I'll become a social outcast. I'll become, you mentioned I'll be boring. And what I was remembering as you were saying, I just didn't want to be boring to them or feel boring or feel bored, is that I remember in right before I started drinking in my late teens, that I had this group of younger friends who just were a year younger than me, but they still hadn't like gotten pulled into the drinking crowd yet. And we would go out and have so much fun. We were so goofy and so carefree. And we would do all of these ornery fun and maybe obnoxious things, but we were so creative and we were not boring. And then I remember like maybe the next year, all of a sudden I felt like compelled to be hanging around the kids my own age, or maybe there was a boy, or who knows how I got sucked into going from this innocent, cute little fun that we were having to this. Wow, okay, well, now to be fun, you need to drink and go out and party. And I look back and I think I was not boring. I was absolutely not boring, but the shift in what is okay culturally for us to do starts to happen somewhere in that late teens, early 20s, where some of the things we do for fun and excitement and entertainment start to become juvenile or unproductive because we don't get rewarded for them financially, or it's not going to get us a college scholarship. So, oh, you can't paint, you can't dance, you can't do all of those things anymore. And so then we take on alcohol as part of our personality, and that becomes really dangerous because when we hinge all of our friendships and all of our ability to have fun on this substance, then we start to psychologically believe that we're not capable with to do all of those things without it. And so when it comes to that connection aspect, what I want you to remember first is there was a time when you could have fun and connect with people without all of that. And we lost it. And so it's kind of like we just got out of practice. And so I want you to remember back that that is possible. You just have to believe that for yourself. Now, the next part is realizing that everyone else is not going to make the same choice as you. So that is when you were kind of talking about, Shanna, that you're going to have to reckon with, how do I, make sense of my existing friendships? And I'm very similar to you in that I realized that so many of the things that were happening after hours with my friends weren't really that fulfilling. In fact, they were pretty repetitive and mundane. And it really was difficult to connect with people at the loud bar where you're watching the football game or at the social event, whatever, because there's just too much stimulation. You can't have a proper conversation. And so I really did what you had done as well. And I just started kind of manipulating isn't the word that I want, but yeah, kind of like manipulating the context of my friendships to where it worked out for me. So I was making the invitation. Can we go for a walk? Can we go for coffee? Can we go for breakfast or lunch or do this activity that doesn't um, uh, circulate around drinking so that I could still have that fulfillment? And luckily, the context of a lot of my friendships have transitioned to where that's possible. And I've also attracted, and this is true for my clients as well, but I'll just speak on my personal context. I've also attracted a lot of friends where drinking isn't their priority and their norms. So we can go out after hours and do things that aren't drinking focused. And I just say that to assure you that you can still have fun and be fun. You can still have friends and make friends. You're just going to have to get a little creative about what that looks like and shift your preconceived notions of what it means to have fun, be fun, and connect with people. And that's really the first step of making that transition to being successfully alcohol free for me and most people. Now, there is a select group of people who still can tolerate the same activities and just be sober. I just know very few of them.
Yeah. Yeah, I tried that. It's like, and I can tolerate it for a short amount of time, but then it's like 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, and then people are getting wild. And
Yes.
okay, now I just want to go home. And we can talk about spouse relations, like relationship with spouses and how that comes into play. But I will say my husband is very social. Like he's in sales, he's in medical sales. And
Mm-hmm.
that's part of his profession is to like be outgoing and friendly and get to know
Schmooze
people. Ask,
people.
yeah, like ask all the questions that people want to be asked. And I feel like, like you feel like, oh, I'm dragging him out again. I've always been the one in our relationship to be like, I think it's time to go home. Like he's never the one. Like, okay, we've had enough. Let's go home. Like it's not that. So that's something that we definitely have struggled with even before I was completely sober. But yeah, and so going back to the friends thing, and then we can talk about like the family dynamics a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But the friends, so are there other, I don't want to say like clubs, but you said like you attracted friends who aren't drinkers
Yeah.
and started to build a network with that. And so it's interesting because I'm in an interesting point of life where two of my three children are in college, one is in high school, and the majority of my circle has revolved around moms of my
Mm-hmm.
kids
Yep.
and their activities. And thankfully I've built a really great network, or neighbors, or like moms in my same life,
Mm-hmm.
my same cohort. And now I don't really have that. Like I'm not meeting all the new people that I used to. Like I have a church group that I go to, like with other moms, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
starting to find some other friends there that, like you said, the culture isn't built around drinking, but
Mm-hmm.
I'm having a harder time at this stage in my life, like attracting people. And then I work, like I have an online business, I work at home. I don't
Mm-hmm.
I don't have
Yep.
my coworkers. And so it's an interesting time. So do you have any tips on, other than I don't even know, like go
Yeah,
out.
I do. I do.
Okay,
Well,
tell.
I hope that some of your audience is open to maybe a intangible kind of spiritual perspective, because I'm going to give some examples that really align with my values and the way that I found that it works. And I'm going to use very non-denominational broad words like the universe, and you can insert whichever words make sense to you. So, the first thing I would have anyone do, and you included, is shift your internal dialogue to amazing aligned friends are available to me right now. And just having this mindset of, I know there's other people out there who I have been passing by, like walking by blindly, two ships passing in the wind, that I just haven't noticed and they haven't noticed me yet because my mindset hasn't shifted. So the way things work from a spiritual and energetic perspective is like attracts like. You probably heard the phrase your vibe attracts your tribe. Now, when you're drinking, your level of vibration is at a specific level. So of course you're going to attract and be attracted to more people who vibrate at that specific level. And you could even just substitute that as more people with common interests. So you're going to be surrounding yourself with more people that are like you and seeking out more people that are like you, which then creates this predisposition that, oh, everyone drinks. And how am I ever going to make friends that don't drink? Well, the thing is that no matter where you live, even if you live in the smallest pea pod of a town, there are other people out there who you haven't noticed yet or you haven't connected with that could be aligned friends with you. But because you're kind of at this one specific level, you're just not noticing them. It's like you have blinders on. So they're walking right past you at the coffee shop, at the yoga studio, at the wherever, and you're just not connecting. But what will happen if you do that one small thing and you make the mental shift of new aligned friends are always available to me? Then you open yourself up just energetically to seeing and being recognized by those people and also recognizing those people. So maybe you're at the coffee shop and you see this one woman who you've seen her every day for 2 years, but you've never said hello. And all of a sudden you get this internal nudge just to be like, hey, gal, I see you every single day and I've never said hello. I'm Amanda. Or maybe she feels that energy just cosmically and introduces herself to you or himself or whomever. And so I think that what you'll find is if you just open yourself up to it, it's possible that these people are already around you. You just haven't quite connected on a level yet. And also, we have to be bold and go out and do new things to make new friends and find new people. And so that means, okay, consider no matter where you live, where might more mindful people like me hang out? Might they be at a gym or a coffee shop or somewhere, a very early yoga class on a Saturday morning because they're not hungover? And where can I go to put myself in these situations where they might be? And how can I be bold and introduce myself to them and try to make new friends and kind of like flirt around a little bit and see who else is out there? And I think that's the hard part because we do get really stuck in our comfort zone or um this phrase will sound harsh, but for you, like in your social group, your friends by convenience, because you have some sort of convenient connection like your kids. And I don't mean that they're bad friends by any means, but that's how you magnetize each other is by convenience, right? Or by some sort of thing that you overlap in your life. So now we have to look for new overlaps that aren't as obvious. And that's intimidating to people, especially in their 30s, 40s, and 50s. And I promise you, there's more people out there. There are more people out there who want to support you and want to connect with you and want to have fun with you. And I just really feel this because I realized that, I used to have a cell phone full of numbers of people who I could call for a good time, but they weren't the closest connection friends. And now I have a group of people who is a bit smaller but much mightier in terms of how I connect with them and how we support one another. And I think it's really beautiful. I have now in my late 30s what I wanted for the past 2 decades, and it feels really fulfilling to have put in the work to find and nurture those friendships.
Yes, I agree with that. And it just made me think like in the last week, I go to strength training on Mondays and Fridays.
Mhm.
And a lot of times it's an early morning class. And there's this woman who I'd been setting up next to for my strength class for
Mhm.
years.
Yeah.
And, we'd like say hello to each other. And just a couple weeks ago, we're like, we've been setting up next to each other for probably a couple of years now, and we don't even know each other's names. And that's all it took. I'm like, what's your name? And then it was like, boom, it was just
Yes.
couldn't stop talking. And I'm like, oh, this could, and then in my head, I'm thinking this could potentially be a new friend. It's like,
Exactly that.
it is like you just need to pay it. And it's funny because now I'm to the point like now that my kids are pretty self-sufficient, like I have one at home, but he drives and he's in so much stuff, I barely see him. I'm to that point again where I'm like, okay, like I don't feel bored, but for a long time when I was so busy with my kids, I was I would tell myself, I'm like, I don't have time for any more relationships or any other, like, I cannot pour myself into any new friendships right now because I am so maxed out. And I'm sure a lot of women
Mhm.
like this, but now it's like you just kind of come full circle and you're like, okay, now I do have time for a few new, maybe like you said, more intimate relationships and people who are going to push you more and help you to realize your potential rather than, just clinking glasses at the bar. And, usually things happen that you don't, that you feel regretful about the next day. And
Yeah.
so, yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, gotta have your eyes opened for sure. So okay, so I don't talk about my kids much on this podcast. I really don't, because it's about metabolic health and they're like, think that that's completely boring. Um, and just health in general and eating. But I want to talk a little bit about my older two children because maybe you have like there's a lot of moms in my same age bracket who might be struggling with this a little bit too. So my daughter's 21, my son is
Mhm.
19, and then my youngest is, and they both go, like my older two both go to college. And my daughter is very Christ-centered. She found right away when she went to college, like a ministry group, and she's very
Mhm.
active with that. And she was just like you were talking about, she has so much fun with these other college students. And she found her now fiance through this group. And she
Mhm.
talks about all these crazy things that they did, but there's never alcohol involved. Like this,
Yes.
they just find alternative things to do. But then there's my son, who definitely drinking culture is part of the weekends, is
Mhm.
part of what he does, even though he's underage. I'll be, I'll be
Yeah.
very
I mean, I started drinking when I was underage too.
Oh
Like
yeah,
that's
we
just the
all
culture
did.
of it.
I mean,
Yeah.
it is. And it's funny because he will say to my daughter, like my daughter will be like, okay, their names are Paige and Hunter. She'll be like, Hunter, you can find there are other things to do other than drink on the weekends. And he's like, well, people like my friends will look at people like you in your group of friends as
Mhm.
completely weird and out there.
Mhm.
And he's like, and the other thing is he went to college with a lot of his high school friends. So they were
Mm.
very well established
Yep.
relationships. But then I go back to, and I've talked with him about this. I'm like, you have been friends with most of these boys since you're 7 years old. You obviously weren't drinking. As like you had
Yeah.
with these boys. But as a mom, I'm struggling with he's an adult and I just have to throw this out there too. So it was just Thanksgiving a couple weeks ago, and he came home and he asked his dad and I if he could host a case race here. If 10 of his friends, if you don't know what a case race is, it means you are partnered up with another person and you have to finish a case, like see who can finish a case
I'm
first.
surprised I don't know what that is since I grew up in the
Without
Midwest. It's exactly
puking.
something we would have done.
Oh my gosh, without puking. If you puke, you're disqualified. And I'm like, absolutely not. Like, no, I am not supporting. Like, I love your friends. I've known them for 15 years, but no, like you're underage and I don't support that. So
Yeah.
those are the extremes that I have in my household. And
Mhm.
so you have a program or like a challenge, I think, for sober curious people. But
Mhm.
it's so hard when you want somebody to be sober curious, but they're just not there yet.
Totally.
And he has said to me before, because he knows I haven't drank in years now. He'll say he thinks my life is boring. Like he thinks
Mhm.
my life is boring and
Yeah.
fulfilling. So it's so hard, and he's 19, so the
Sure.
maturity level just isn't there. But oh my gosh, I don't even know what I'm asking.
Oh,
For
I have a sense of what you're asking. So I'm
like,
going to give you a couple of different things because
okay,
you said there's a lot of moms, especially when they stop drinking or they start doing things for their health, they want different, well, any mom wants their child to have a better, even better life than they had. And so, we have all of this wisdom that we know what's led to that for us. And we want our, children and those who are coming after us to understand that. And I think that I was very much on your son's track. I would have had a completely different life trajectory if I would have done the thing that your daughter did, which I think is so like honorable and awesome that she's just like found her authentic self. And I also think that the drinking culture is also an incredible rite of passage. And while that can be very destructive, as long as he knows the limits of, hey, we don't do these things. And if you need to talk about it, this is an open place for it. My perspective is that I also think that if I would have kept down the trajectory of being the kind of more boring good girl that I was, that things in my life wouldn't have gotten bad enough and uncomfortable enough that I would have massively shifted pace to do the work, the good, great, amazing work I do today. I probably would have ended up at a very basic job, climbing the corporate ladder, following along with what I was told I should do. And there's nothing wrong with that, but I was meant to do bigger work. And sometimes you have to put yourself on a trajectory that makes you uncomfortable so that you can get on an even bigger, better path. And I think that I assume that that is what happened to me with my intuitive, guidance. And so I would say for anyone who has a kid that you're kind of watching them go through their wild, crazy party phase, as long as you are clear with them that, hey, these are the markers that we look for that I just want you to be aware of. And if you ever need to talk to someone, I'm here. But that we serve as an example for what's possible. That yes, you can quit drinking and this is how you will feel. And you can quit drinking and not be. I think the bigger thing is, guess what? I started to embrace boring the older I got, but I wasn't ready for that until I hit a certain point. But the bigger part is you can be a non drinker and not be annoying about it. And I think as long as we serve as an example and not as someone who is like preaching about alcohol and the evils of alcohol and, I wish you would quit drinking, that we don't want to do that because then we alienate people. If we just serve as a, wow, I don't drink and I feel so great. And I don't have to like dangle that or like beat somebody with a stick about it. What you've created for your children and for, by the way, your friends, your partners, whomever else, if you just show an example of this is what it's like to live healthy, I'm not going to cram it down your throat. Eventually, when they're ready, you've created a safe space for them to be like, oh, well, my mom doesn't drink anymore and she's pretty okay. Or, hey, my friend Amanda doesn't drink anymore and she seems to be living a pretty good life. Maybe I can ask her about that. And I think it just creates an open space for conversation if you show up as an example. But it is hard because a lot of us will see either children or friends or partners that we know that their relationship with alcohol has become unproductive or destructive, and we want to pull them along on our path with us. But people have to come to a path of wellness of any kind of on their own. I think that most people, need to do that for themselves rather than have it presented to them. There's very few people who you can just present them with an option and they'll be like, okay, let's go.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice, and that's what I've tried to model with him
Yeah.
and with any nutrition. I mean, they know, like,
Mhm.
I eat really clean, but there's some junk in our pantry. I don't wanna
Yeah.
extreme about anything, but I that's exactly what I tell him. I'm like, "You know what? I just wanna feel good, and that's why I make the choices that I do, and I wanna be here for you, and I want to be here with a clear mind, and I don't expect it." And I was doing the exact same thing as he
Yeah.
was at
Yep.
his age, and
Oh
he
yeah.
knows that, and he said, "Oh, you
Uh-huh.
did that?" I'm like, "Yes, I did." I was
Uh-huh.
never like I never felt good about it though. So
Yeah.
just know like there is support here for you if you want to change. And it's hard because he's a funny kid. And I'm like, I'm sure I would love to be like drinking with him. He would be the fun social whatever, but
Mhm.
at least he knows that there's an alternative. And I think deep down, like he is curious about it, but he's just not ready. He's just
Oh
not.
yeah.
And
No,
then
I mean, I wasn't ready until probably 10 years after that. 28 is when, and like you said, I came to this decision quite a bit younger than a lot of people. So don't let that deter you if you are listening to this and you're a bit older than I was, because I was an outlier in making this decision. Most of my clients are late 30s to early 50s making this decision. And a lot of it has to do with, just wanting to feel better and all of the things that go along with the benefits of not drinking.
yeah. So any advice to spouses? So I know for me and my husband, not that he's a boozer or anything, but like some of his family members have had issues with alcohol for sure. And I don't know if you want to call it genetic predisposition or what you
Mhm.
want to call it, but I know that if there is such a thing, that is there for him. And like I said, the nature of his job puts him in a social situation very
Mhm.
regularly. And he has dabbled with going alcohol free. And again, I don't put pressure. I'm just like, you know what? I'm your driver. And, I just like to feel good on the,
Uh-huh.
and he's cut back a lot since
Mhm.
I have, and he's done like the dry January thing a couple of times, but that's kind of the extent that he's gone. But any recommendations for spouses who maybe there's one spouse who's there, but the other one is like maybe trying to get their toes wet a little bit, but not quite there. Or
Mhm.
in a lot of cases, they've tried it, they liked it, but in for some whatever reasons they've slipped back and
Yeah.
can't seem to like stay all in.
Sure. And I think it would be very similar to what I kind of advise with kids or anyone else is that you are here to be an example, and trying to strong arm someone into a decision they're not ready to make is going to work in to your detriment. So unless there is a problem, which does happen every now and again, where the other partner is drinking in excess, they're causing, what I'm going to assume that most of your listeners are female. So what the female partner has realized is after she quit drinking that there is like a big disparity or separation in how the relationship is going now that alcohol is out of the way. Those are going to be rare occurrences. And I'm going to kind of put that on the sidelines because I'd have a whole different set of advice for that. But let's say there's partner is like yours, in that he's taken breaks and he can be just as magnanimous and outgoing without it if he really wants to be and has liked it and felt better. I think that we all have to remember that again. Well, first of all, men metabolize alcohol much differently than women and have very different experiences with alcohol. And so he might not quite yet have felt the same level of pain that you feel. And that doesn't even take into consideration hormones and perimenopause and all of the things that alcohol can really jack up for women. So knowing that, men are going to really just have different relationships with alcohol, both physically and psychologically, and that as long as they are supportive and encouraging to you, and that your relationship isn't suffering because you two are on different kind of intellectual and energetic levels once they start to drink, I think that the biggest piece of advice I would have is to just be an example, show them what is possible, but also to set boundaries. But remember that boundaries aren't, I want you to do this because it makes it to where I don't have to work on myself. And some people would set the boundary of, I need you to not drink because that makes it easier for me, or whatever. Like, you doing anything for your health and wellness is difficult, and you have to do that for you. Now, an amazing partner will just come along for the ride and be incredibly supportive and maybe take breaks without you asking. But you have to remember that this is your responsibility, this is your choice, and it will get easier. And if there are little boundaries that you want to set, like let's say on date night, you've realized, wow, we're just really on different levels and I'm not getting to feel connected to you and I don't like that. Is it okay if on date night we both agree that we're not drinking? That would be really helpful for me because that's our one-on-one connection time. And I really love you and love connecting with you. And that doesn't help me to feel as connected. I think that is a great boundary ask of your partner versus, I need you to stop drinking because I'm stopping and it's easier for me if you don't do it. I really want to hone in on what is the connected application that we can have when we're making an ask of our partner to kind of join us in little aspects of this journey, knowing that the buddy system isn't usually a productive approach, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I've seen that. And you can't force anybody into
Yeah.
something that you want them to do that they don't want to do or they're not
Hmm.
ready to do. And
Yeah.
maybe they'll never be ready. And yeah, it's just you got to be patient and just do. I mean, again, not that my husband has a big issue with it, but yeah, lots of praying and support. And
Hmm.
I've just taken myself out of that whole culture, and he knows. And he
Yes.
so, and like I said, I feel like I've made more leaps and bounds in so many areas of my life in the last 2 years.
Hmm.
And 2024 was an absolute wreck for me as far as like what things that have happened in my personal life. My very regular listeners know I lost both my parents. We
Hmm.
to like clean out their house. We just so many things. It was just a train wreck of a year. But I never felt like, oh, a glass of wine is just really gonna help me get over this
Hmm.
like the trauma of this, or I had a really long day cleaning out all my childhood memories at their house.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, I'm sure that there are triggers for a lot of people that would, kind of cause a relapse. Um,
Mhm.
do you have tips, while we're talking about that, like people can have ahead of time? Like
Mhm.
if they're facing these times, I mean, and then I've talked about this with food a lot. Like, oh, if you're feeling like you're gonna go and binge, like let's do this and set your environment up. But I
Yes.
would think, keeping alcohol out of your house would be tip number one, but anything else that you can help us along just to help with the recurrence being less?
Yeah, I'll give a very practical tip, and then I'll also give a kind of more of a metaphysical tip, which I think metaphysics are practical if you want them to be. But on the practical level, I think that if you've committed to being alcohol free, you have to make it non-negotiable for whatever period that is, and it needs to be a long enough period that you know that you're going to experience some discomfort. The type of woman who I work with is probably the type of woman you work with, very wellness minded, very capable, very high achieving. And for someone like that, setting a goal like they do in the recovery world, which is one day at a time, doesn't work because that's a throwaway goal. So they're just coming up with an excuse and then starting over on Monday or the next day or the first of the next month. I want you to consider committing to something that's reasonable and achievable, yet still challenging. So 30, 60, 90 days, and really setting that as no matter what happens, come hell or high water during this time, I'm not going to drink. There's actually another alternate philosophy that I love that one of my clients took on one of the years when she was sober curious is she decided she was absolutely not going to drink in the face of special occasions or tragedy, which is so often when we make the decision that we're going to drink. And so even setting a rule like that, like those two things are off the table. I can drink at other things, but special occasions and tragedy are off the table. And when you really look at it, that probably takes a lot of that probably really limits how much you're drinking anyway. But I want to look at it from the spiritual perspective as well, which is what alcohol does when we're faced with adversity, especially grief or loss, and some of the heavy topics that you had to deal with over the past year is alcohol can be so tempting because we haven't been taught to feel those feelings, and they're so intense and they're so heavy and they're so overwhelming. And yet, when we drink, it doesn't get rid of the feeling. It just boomerangs back around and makes it to where we have to handle it the next day. And by the way, with a hangover. And
Right.
that's no fun, right? So, how do you really want to be grieving and sad and cleaning out your childhood home with a hangover that only heightens your anxiety? And also makes you a little numb to the experience to where you're not fully there. What I want to remind people is that alcohol is a preservative in ways, like we use it in ancient medicine to like preserve tinctures. And what it does in your system is it preserves those negative emotions in your body. And you do not want grief and anxiety and sadness and heartbreak hanging around in your body. You want to let those things out. And so as uncomfortable as it might be to grieve the passing of your parents, to grieve the stress of cleaning out your childhood home, those are important experiences that you really want to process and you need to process. And um you know also, what an honor to feel grief because it means that we've loved. And it's such a counter, when you look at it that way, it's such a counterintuitive thing to drink your way through it. And so I'm so happy that you already had this runway of, I'm not drinking, I can handle life without this, because it probably allowed you to be really, really present for this moment that, for better or worse, you're never going to get back. And grief is such an important piece of our life process, as is managing heartbreak and stress and anxiety and all of the other levels of it. But grief is probably one of the most deep um, pieces of that kind of negative emotional scale. And what a beautiful thing to get the opportunity to fully experience and process rather than just holding on to it in your body. So I am so sorry that you had to deal with that all this year, but also I'm so proud of you and so happy for you that you got to and you chose to be present with it.
Yeah, I love that, and I've thought about that throughout the year. I'm like, gosh, this like every time I would kind of get my footing, I just feel
Mhm.
like the rug was pulled out again. I'm like,
Yeah.
if alcohol had been part of my life, I would not have dealt with all of the emotions and everything that happened as well as I.
Mhm.
as I did. So
Yeah.
I couldn't agree more. I think that
Mhm.
it definitely helped me through everything that
Mhm.
went on this year, and it's still going on. I mean, it's very fresh. My
Oh,
dad,
it's a
yeah,
very long process.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and my dad just passed away a couple weeks ago, so it's just very still very fresh, I think that that's just another really important aspect of this whole episode. Everybody's dealing with grief and loss and challenges, and it just the potential to overcome things is so much higher when you don't
Mhm.
have the alcohol in your system. But I'd
Yep.
love to circle back. I think we've talked about this before somewhere along the line here, but can you touch a little bit on how men and women metabolize alcohol differently, and what,
Mhm.
especially when we are in perimenopause and menopause, and it just seems to like smack us in the face that much
Ooh.
more.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you can probably put this into technical terms much more eloquently than I can, but alcohol messes with all of your vital organs and messes with you on the cellular level. So any of your vital organs, the way that they function and all of the ways in which you process things in your body, alcohol disrupts that process. And so let's even say from a health and wellness process, that you have something that you're trying to heal. Maybe you have an immunodeficiency or something that's frustrating you in your body. When you put alcohol into your system, the way that your body works is your body has to process and fight off the alcohol before it can do any of the other essential processes. So if the essential process is to heal or to, whatever it is you need, well, good luck with that because it's spending all of its time with the alcohol metabolism process. And so, if you want to give your body a fighting chance, it's not even drink less alcohol. If you're trying to heal something or live at an optimal level, I don't want you dripping alcohol into your system at all for a period, because I want you to see exactly what it's like for your body to function at optimal conditions. And the reality is, most people, I have a client right now who she has some crazy gut issues, and she's just hopeful that if she doesn't drink for a little while that those will start to heal themselves. Well, the problem is your body has to first recover from alcohol and then it has to heal all the gut stuff. So even as dismal as this sounds, you're looking at minimal really of a year runway, if not a little bit more. And there's no set time frame, unfortunately, because everybody's processing and healing in a different way. But if you really want to heal something within your body, removing alcohol is very essential. And to speak between men and women, I do not have an expertise in male and alcohol whatsoever, but just in general terms, men's bodies, just how they're built. There is a ton of muscle for men. Women have much more fat. And so women are going to get drunk faster and off of fewer drinks, or feel tipsy or buzz off of fewer drinks. Men, not so much. And so what I tend to see is, especially couples who do decide to do something like dry January together, is that they've stopped drinking, they're eating the same things, they're doing the same things. The husband is shedding weight, he's getting ripped, and the wife is just sitting there at status quo, like, what the heck? Why I haven't lost a pound? What's happening? And she's starting to be frustrated because she's watching her husband turn into like Gerard Butler, and she's over here, which, by the way, good for you. But she's over here just kind of feeling like nothing is happening. And that's because and women's bodies are different. And that can be kind of frustrating to watch. Maybe your husband handles alcohol a little better than you, or he doesn't get as drunk as quickly. And that's frustrating. Or maybe when you quit drinking, he starts to see results more quickly. So just kind of looking out for that if you are someone who maybe you're listening to this around dry January and both of you decide to take a break at the same time, know that your partner, if he is a male, will probably see much different results than you. And that's just the way the cookie crumbles.
Uh-huh. Yeah, we see that with a lot of, whatever it is you're giving up or trying to get healthier. It's like
Yeah.
to think about it.
Yep.
Yeah, that is helpful. And I've talked a lot about blood sugars. Like people are like, well, I actually have better blood sugars when I drink. I'm like, well, yeah, that's because your body shuts off carbon fat metabolism in order to deal with the alcohol. So it looks like your blood sugars are actually better just because your body's not dealing with the carbs and
Hmm.
the whole metabolism because it's trying to get this poison out. But then once it's handled the poison, then you see a big blood sugar spike.
Mhm.
And especially if you're drinking wine or something
Yeah.
fruity or sugary. But yeah, so you see a temporary, and people are like, oh, hey, I get better blood sugars when I'm having alcohol. It's like, well, that's
That's
because
not really, yeah, it's not, it's a little bit of a false positive.
yes, definitely. Before we close out, there's one thing I wanted to make sure that I touched on because this is one of those topics that I don't see a lot of other alcohol-free experts talking about, and that's the whole idea of having this spiritual awakening. And I have seen this in myself in the last year or two for sure. Like there's like I'm not hitting my full potential, and it wasn't like I have not had alcohol in the last couple of years. But can you talk about this idea of a spiritual awakening? Because I like once I was reading your bullet points with that, I'm like, that's me, that's me, that's me, that's
Uh-huh.
me. I just like there's such a bigger purpose for me out there. I'm not sure what it is right now, but I know alcohol's not helping. And there's so many things I'm trying to like decipher and discern and work through that I know that you do help you work with. I don't know if it's specifically women, but women people, maybe it's males too, that are kind of at that point of spiritual awakening.
Yeah, my target demographic is a woman who does have kind of a desire for a more soul-centered life, or she's always believed that there's something somewhere out there that is watching over her and supporting her, and maybe she doesn't put a finger on it, but she just has this sense, and also this sense that there is something, a greater purpose in her life. And it can be really difficult to have an intangible feeling like that, right? That you don't have any hardened proof of yourself, having being meant for more, or that there's something else out there. These are kind of ethereal ideas that we have. But if you have that sense, if you're starting to sense that there is something more for you in your life, or you maybe have asked the question, like, is this all there is? That's a one of the signs if you're kind of on the path of, this is going to sound scary, but an existential crisis where you want to shed all of the weight that society has put on you, of all of the masks and the roles that you've taken on, and you really want to step into your truest authentic self and really tap into your intuition. And at the core, that's what spirituality is. It's finding, who am I before the world taught me and told me who to be, and how can I tap into that inner sense of knowing so that I can take action based on her versus what everyone else has told me is good, right, and popular. And so many women are craving for that because women are incredibly intuitive beings, right? Much more than men, even though men have that possibility as well. But we are intuitive beings, and we deep down crave that connection. And so when we have quieted it or diluted it with alcohol, it doesn't quite get there. And so we start to feel unfulfilled or disconnected. And especially, in this phase of your life where you're coming into, I came into sobriety at 27, 28 is one of your Saturn returns. This is a time of spiritual awakening. And then there's one typically in your kind of mid 40s, 50s, where you're transitioning into a different stage of womanhood. And you're craving for this wisdom, this inner wisdom that is there. And you can't get there with alcohol in the way, because alcohol dilutes your connection to it. It's like trying to connect to your inner wisdom on a 1990s cell phone while you're in a tunnel. It's just going to be really crummy reception. And if you want to get the best reception, just to, on a base level, your intuition, which is the core of your own spiritual connection, getting alcohol out of the way is one of the fastest ways to do that. And it takes time. Like you said, you're 2 years into this journey, but because we have all of this programming that we've taken on throughout our lives, especially as women, you have a lot that you have to unlearn and a lot that you have to question and get clarity on. And you have to figure out, who am I? Who was I meant to be? What is it that I want to do for my next 2 years, 4 years, 6 years? And that's going to change, by the way. As you expand, you're going to have more creative possibilities in your life. And for me, that's what a spiritual connection is about. It's about knowing that there's something bigger out there for you, and that there is always something somewhere watching over you, and you have this desire to connect to it. And I think that it sounds like you're starting to really sense that and tap into it. And some women start to have that sense before they stop drinking, and that's part of the catalyst to stop. And some people start to have it after they stop drinking, and it's more of the catalyst to stay stopped. So no matter what phase you're in, if that resonates with you, I think that you're in the right place.
Yeah, that's very helpful. And to know that there's somebody to help you work through this. Um,
Mhm.
because I've Yeah, I'm just in that place where I'm like, okay, I'm getting some signs, but I'm not sure what to do with them. And I'm not sure, like I will say I'm Christian. So and my listeners know this. And so I'm trying to discern, like, are these signs from God pushing
Mhm.
me away from certain things or towards certain things? Or are they the evil one trying to quiet me? And, like, so that's
Uh-huh.
just kind of where I'm inwardly struggling right now. Um,
Okay, let me give you a really quick analogy that might be helpful. So no matter what, approach you take to religion and spirituality, there's really two internal voices and you kind of talked about the good one and the bad one. Well, the good one is always love centered. It's peaceful, it's possibility, it's opportunity, it is expansive, it is abundant. And if it's speaking to you from that sense, typically it'll be a little smaller and quieter and it's just like a gentle tap on the shoulder. And the other part is ego centered. It is lack, it is competition, it is fear, it is that like ugh, kind of tense piece and it feels like it's shoving you. Like there's a sense of urgency that's pushing you versus something that's gently tapping you. And if you can tune into, am I being like violently shaken to do something and I feel like I have to do it for some reason? That is one thing, and typically that's going to be the bad one, the like the devil on your shoulder, if you will, if you used to watch the same cartoons that I did. Or there's the one that's a little angel on your shoulder, that the voice is soft and pleasant. And it's sometimes hard to hear because it seems so like Pollyanna, too good to be true. But that's usually the one that we want to follow.
okay. Well, that's helpful.
Yeah.
I was
Yes.
like anything at this point.
Uh-huh.
Well,
You're
and
in a really sweet spot. I think 2 years is really when you start to see some massive shifts. Of course, you're seeing incremental changes all along, but really the 2-year mark, you're starting to see some really cool things start to happen.
oh, amazing. Well, as we go into 2025, people are sober curious. They want to try dry January. What kind of resources do you have for them? And
Yeah.
tell us about where we can find them.
Absolutely. Well, I am everywhere on the internet at Amanda Kuda. I'm mostly on Instagram. So if you want to lurk around and see what I'm about, I'm mostly hanging out there. And I also have a book that came out if you're a book or audiobook gal. It's called Unbottled Potential. And if you're not quite sure you want to invest in a book or audiobook, I do have a 21-day challenge that I will give any of your listeners for free. They only need to, and they need to put in the coupon box your first name, so SHANA, and that will like give them full access to this 21-day challenge where you can get a little bit of a taste of how I teach about sobriety for free.
Awesome. Well, we'll link all
Yep.
that in the show notes. Yeah, we didn't even really talk about your book, but Unbottled Potential is available wherever. If you want, like some people really just like a hard resource to
Yeah. Yeah,
that's
and it's really I'm biased, but I think it's really special. So I'd love if you felt inspired by this message. If you check it out, I think you would like it as well.
awesome. Well, thanks for sharing your knowledge. And I'm sure there's a lot of people that are very excited about resources
Yeah.
that you're offering and can work with you further from just like starting to dabble in it to like, whoa, this is some heavy stuff. Yeah,
Yeah,
that I'm ready to handle. So thanks so much.
absolutely. I'm here for it all. Thank you, Shanna. I'm so excited to share this knowledge with your listeners.